There's a lot of experienced players out there with some very interesting freshmen taking the court this season in places like Kentucky, Auburn, and Arkansas. So, who are the top 5 backcourts in the SEC coming into the 2023 and 2024 seasons? Plus, is John Calipari still a top 10 coach in the country? And should more coaches in the SEC be considered for the top 10? Well, that's what we're talking about today on the Hoops Southbound Show.
Tonight, and the Kentucky coronation. Reese knows a ring is coming.
Three-pointer on the way. No good. Close with the dunk at the buzzer. It goes in Arkansas wins.
The Tennessee Volunteers are going to the Sweet 16.
Florida takes its place in history. Back to back and unforgettable.
Calm down, John. Get him away. He's got it. Oh, he's out of here. What do I say?
This season is going to be a very exciting year, not only because basketball is going to be back, but because I feel as a whole, the SEC got better this offseason, Maddie, and in a lot of different ways. This is going to be a competitive year, and Joe Lunardi, as we discussed last week, kind of agrees with us a little bit, which I'm still not fully okay with. But he did say like 8 SEC teams. I'm thinking somewhere between 8 and 10 SEC teams are a real possibility with tournament hopes this year. So let's talk a little bit about who are the best backcourts leading the way in the SEC this season. These are our top 5 SEC backcourts. First, I want to note that there are a lot of talented backcourts in this conference this year, so ranking them is a really difficult task. I think Maddie would agree with me.
Definitely. Today while I was kind of doing a little bit of research, trying to figure out, come down to, the top 5, like we're saying, on several teams, I just kind of had to say, well, I mean, these two are so comparable. I don't know where to put them. So, I mean, there are some I feel like I closed my eyes, threw a dart, and picked that way.
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure I put an honorable mention in for this top 5 list because I wanted to let people know that, yeah, there's other backcourts that we're looking at. So please don't take offense if we didn't list your team. We are going to talk about everybody here starting in about 3 weeks when we do team previews. But that's going to be a very in-depth conversation later on. And I do think that there are probably 8 high-level backcourts in the SEC. So getting this down to 5 was really difficult. All right, Maddie, let's get started. I'll start with my number 5 team. That way you can end with your number 1 because you are the queen of the top 5 lists around here.
Are we doing honorable mentions?
Oh, I'll start with my honorable mention. I will start with my honorable mention. And my honorable mention was the Alabama Crimson Tide. Very great backcourt, in my opinion, when you look at who they're returning. Marcus Sears is really good in there. Obviously, they lost some key talent coming out. Brandon Miller was a forward, but you could slide him into that 2 role. There were a little bit of, there was some talent that went out into the transfer portal. But when I'm looking at their backcourt, you got Marcus Sears. You've also got, it was a big hit when you lost JQ. And then you've also got some the guys who came in from the transfer portal. Really, the thing I'm looking at Alabama, or Aaron Estrada is the name. I was trying to get it out of my head. He could be a breakthrough player for the Crimson Tide this year. He is a legitimate 3-level scorer and an NBA level shot creator. He's very talented. He could be one of those breakout guys for the Tide. Alabama to me right now, their backcourt, to me, that's kind of like 6 or 7. I think they're worth mentioning because they are returning Marcus Sears, and they had to recover a lot because they lost Javon Quinterly also out of that backcourt this last season as well into the transfer portal to Memphis. So it's they lost a lot, but they're keeping some good pieces, and they got some stuff that I like going on. That is my honorable mention. Maddie, do you have an honorable mention?
So I think we spend too much time with each other because my honorable mention is also the Alabama Crimson Tide.
How do we do? Like, we didn't even compare lists, but go ahead. Give us your pitch for the Tide being your honorable mention.
Yeah, I mean, the big 2 we mentioned coming back, we had Rylan Griffin and Mark Sears. And then with the big question mark, the reason I didn't put them in my top 5 was Estrada, mainly because we aren't quite sure how he's going to flow with this Alabama offense, but I think he has a possibility to do great things for this Alabama team this season.
Yeah. Okay. So we're in the like mindset for Aaron Estrada. We don't know, but there's a lot of potential upside there for Aaron Estrada. I think he's a really interesting transfer pickup that Nate Oates got. So yeah, I think that is an honorable mention, is a great honorable mention. And I think it's really good. I'll move on to my number 5, and we'll try to talk a little bit more in depth instead of just brief highlights here for Alabama. Of course, we're going to go much more in depth through the team previews, but let's start with Kentucky. Right off the bat, Kentucky is my number 5 backcourt this season. Right off the bat, I don't have Kentucky higher because there's a lot of young pieces in this backcourt. That said, there's a lot of hope and a lot of thinking that this could be one of the best backcourts in the country this season. So I'm not going to dismiss them. I just want to see more product moving forward to move them higher on this list. So I'm starting them out basically at number 5. What I like is that you got super talented guys like DJ Wagner who can play both the 1 and 2 spots. Wagner averaged 4.8 assists per contest, while he was also scoring 14 points a game in Global Jam. He's a very steady, but he is a very aggressive basketball player. I personally really like his style of play. It's one that I enjoy watching. And then Wagner should get backed up at the point by another freshman, and that's Robert Dillingham. Dillingham's super creative. He's got a lot of high potential, and he has a lot of natural feel and instinct for the game. He's got a great attitude from what I've heard from him in the press. He can be a little bit unpredictable, however, and there's some concern on his defensive end of the ball as well. What's really interesting to Kentucky is that a lot of these guys, you can mix up the backcourt with guys like Reed Shepherd, Antonio Reeves, and you could have them playing different positions. So you get the chance for a lot of different looks and options for Cal to test the court. And most of all these guys are capable of being placed in 1 to 3 spots on the floor. So Shepherd is also a throwback kind of style guard. He's not the most athletic guy I've ever seen, but he has got super strong legs, solid shot mechanics, and a very high basketball IQ. And throughout Global Jam, you saw his effort on defense. He's willing to make a play at all times. And then, of course, Kentucky is returning Antonio Reeves. It was a big move during transfer portal season. He was the team leader last year in 3-point field goal percentages, field goals made, points per 40 minutes, the number 2 free throw shooter on the team by percentage, and he tied Oscar Tshiebwe as the number 1 player for game high scoring at 37 points last season for the Kentucky Wildcats. So he's a huge piece to get back for John Calipari.
Awesome. I mean, you definitely made some good points for Kentucky, so I'll keep them in mind as we go through the list. My number 5 was someone that apparently our fans don't like to think that I like talking about, which maybe I kind of made it a point last season, but the Mizzou Tigers are my number 5.
Okay.
Mankey they're returning the majority of their production in the backcourt, and they have some pretty promising transfers. When you look at, the players that are more than likely going to be potential starters, we are looking at Brown, Honor, and East II coming in. And I think they're going to be a solid team, mainly providing the majority of their production back, like I said.
Yeah, that's an interesting pick. I do not have Mizzou in my top 5, so I'll save everybody the suspense on that one. But again, I think there's several good backcourts out there, so it's not shocking to think that Mizzou could possibly be out there. And you're right, there's a ton of experience for Mizzou, so I like your pick at number 5. I think it's really good. It's different than my thought process, but it's not a bad pick. I don't think it's a bad pick at all. Where my concerns lie in Mizzou is currently the front court anyway. So. My number 4 is Auburn. There are 7 seniors on this team, and this is going to be a very experienced team, and the backcourt it's no exception. Now, during this offseason, 24/7 Sports' Isaac Trotter sent a very strong message on the Auburn basketball team's program when they were putting together this roster, and he said they were getting a lot of guards that had some real juice. But that was prior to finding out that his crystal ball prediction that Tyron Lawrence would be going to Auburn was not going to be coming true. Instead, Lawrence decided that he was going back to Vanderbilt. But this backcourt's still really good for Auburn. Pearl made sure to fortify Auburn's guard rotation with Aiden Holloway, Katie Johnson, Trey Donaldson, and Denver Jones. A lot of good pieces there. Denver Jones is projected to be the starter this season for Auburn at the number 2 spot. And I mean, he was really good. He's going to be taking the place of Zep Jasper, who just left. Denver Jones is an FIU transfer, 20 points a game, 3.8 rebounds per game for FIU last season. He made 47% of his shots. That's an unreal shooting percentage. Jones finished second in Conference USA in scoring at 20.1 points per game during his sophomore season on 37.1% three-point shooting. It's crazy. And then he was 55.2% from two and 84.5% from the free throw line. I mean, it's nuts. And then you got a very young guy out there, Auburn fans are really pumped about, in Aiden Holloway. Now, he is yet to prove himself as really a full-time handler or decision maker at a higher level, but he's an outstanding shooter and a very smart passer. He's got range. And he's got tools to get his shot off. He does an excellent job of creating his own shot, and he's willing to run off the ball, which in turn gives him more open looks. He can be a bit of a gambler in defense. I do want to point that out, which could pay off big on one end, or it could also, allow someone to blow right past him. So that's also a potential reason. Right now, I don't have the Tigers any higher, and it's simply because they lost over 19 points a game from their backcourt with this in the transfer portal this last offseason. So there are pieces missing. Want to see how it's going to all come together, but there are some talented spots for Auburn.
Yeah, definitely some good points there. I looked heavily at Auburn, and it was one of those just kind of flip a coin teams for me. But solid selection there, David. My number 4, going with Texas A&M. They are returning 2 of the top backcourt players that I think will carry this team to new heights. We're looking, of course, at Wade Taylor and Boots Radford, who led the Aggies to an unbelievable season. And I feel like nobody really had them in their sights last year. So I think, it's only going to get better from there. And those 2 developing and choosing to stay at Texas A&M is going to be huge for that team overall and just morale building as well as player development.
I like Texas A&M a lot, and they are going to be in this list going forward here in a minute. But yeah, they're really exciting. They are really exciting to look at, and they didn't have to go get a lot on the transfer portal. So they're definitely a team I like, and I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with this year in the conference, as long as things get off to a much better start than what they have in previous years under Buzz. But on paper, you got to love it. It's a great paper fit for Texas A&M. You did kind of smash A&M into one word. Was it Texas A&M? Is that what you said, or M? Or
I feel like I said Texas A&M. I don't know. I've been tripping over my words today. It's been terrible.
You know what? It's a Monday, when we're recording this. So sometimes we mess things up, we all get that Monday feeling going on every now and then. All right. The number 3 team I have is the Arkansas Razorbacks. To me, the Hogs have the potential to be the best backcourt in the SEC this season, but I'm not willing to put them at number 1 until we see more on the court this season. This is probably one of the most versatile backcourts in the conference, though, based on the abilities of each and every guard's individual game. And they are also very experienced in that backcourt. These are things I like. The problem is I just haven't seen them play together, so I have questions on how the dynamics are going to work. And we also have seen Eric Musselman kind of just play with things until things work in the past. When this is a much more traditional Eric Musselman team than it has been in years past. And what we saw year 1, year 2, year 3 is that I'm going to try this guy and then this guy and then this guy and then this guy until he gets the formula right in the kitchen. It's kind of craziness. So that's what I'm waiting on, really, to see what he can put together with this backcourt. Leading the front court, though, for the Razorbacks is, of course, Devo Davis, who just returned from the NBA draft process. Devo has improved each and every season under Eric Musselman. He's a great defender on top of that. And then you also got out of the transfer area, guys like L. Ellis. He was an honorable mention last year for all ACC selection. Ellis averaged 17.7 points a game. He's good for 3rd most in the conference last season. And then Tremont Mark, another talented guard coming back to college after testing out the NBA waters. Great ISO game, Great defense. Houston Cougars were in the top 10 in Ken Palm's adjusted defensive efficiency ratings last season. He's definitely someone that you're kind of seeing that can play some high-level defense with Debo Davis as another guard out there. And then Khalif Battle, who only averaged, 17.9 points per game, 3.6 rebounds, and 1.8 assists per game, with shooting 41%, 35%, and 89.8% shooting splits across 27 games. And then there's the newcomer kid, the only freshman that's going to be added into this backcourt, and that is Layden Blocker, who is dynamic in the open floor and has tremendous end-to-end speed. A lot of people who are familiar with Arkansas have been calling him just a different version of Ricky Council. And so he's going to be very exciting to watch for the Razorbacks as a young gun out there.
All right. Running it back to your number 5, my number 3 is Kentucky. Huge selection of amazing talent in the backcourt. Honestly, the only reason I don't have them as the number 1 pick, like you said, the unpredictability of freshmen. You kind of ran through all their stats already, but my major points here: Dillingham, Edwards, Thiero, and Reeves both returning, Shepard, Wagner, and Burks. Huge names that Cal's going to be able to interchange in and out. So, you're going to have fantastic starters, whoever they are, and fantastic backups for those starters. And shoot, I guess if you need a little extra, you throw in your third string if, you're beating whatever team badly enough.
Yeah, like I said, the freshman comment is the most important thing here that I think everybody, these guys are extremely talented. A lot of these guys are going to the NBA and they're going to have careers in the NBA. It's a great team. What we just have seen in college basketball over the years is that experience seems to be winning out over the last several seasons. And so that's kind of the hesitancy. It's kind of like the days of the best one and done era is completely gone past the pandemic. And we'll get into that a little bit more after the break when we talk about Cal. But, it's a good backcourt. I can't fault it there. It's a really good team. And I just want to see more. That's the thing. I want to see how it will actually be instead of just trusting the rankings that are coming out of there for the top classes and freshmen, because they don't always produce nowadays, because there are so many guys who have hung around because of the COVID year, transfer portal. You're seeing a lot different talent and a lot more talent spread across the NCAA. So it's much more difficult for a group of freshmen to win, I feel like, nowadays, a title or prove to be one of the best in the country. But talent-wise, they're there. They're definitely in the top 5 in the SEC.
Yeah, especially moving in the transition from high school to college, you got to take into consideration the change in the style of play, the higher IQ that you're going to higher basketball IQ that you're going to have moving forward with some of these people who've been around 3 to 4 years. They aren't going to want to admit it, but they're going to know a little bit more than the freshmen.
Yeah, no, they're going to be great. And speaking of the guys that know a little bit more than the freshmen, again, we're talking about Texas A&M, who was the team that you had picked earlier. That's my number 2 team. Texas A&M, Boots Radford and Wade Taylor returned to College Station for another season together. Radford was the game high leader for the Aggies last season with 31 points, but Taylor was the points per game leader for the Aggies last year. And he was also the 3-point field goals made leader, the free throw made leader, the assist leader, the usage rate leader, and the steals per game leader for the Aggies. He's a one-man wrecking crew for the Aggies out there. And additionally, on top of all of that, that's really the icing on the cake when it comes to the Aggies. When I look at their roster, the Aggies are returning 5 upperclassmen to this backcourt alone. This team finished second in the SEC last season, and a big reason was due to their backcourt finding ways to score and constantly get to the free throw line. That was a big portion of what they did last year, and it led to them a lot of success. So my number 2, Texas A&M.
Hey, I can't blame you there, David. If anybody is watching that watched last season, I was ready to hang a Wade Taylor poster up in what was my podcast room before it became my dog's room. So, I'm a Wade Taylor fan. Thought about putting him higher, but there's just so much talent. Had to spread the love.
Yeah, I get it, and he's fun to watch. It's going to be great to watch him for another season in the SEC because I think he's a next level talent. He really is. Definitely. All right. Go ahead.
So my number 2, again, somebody that we've already talked about, your Arkansas Razorbacks.
There we go.
Amazing selection between returning talent, grad transfers, your regular transfers, and your freshmen. like you said, we've got several options in the backcourt who I think are going to be super productive for Eric Musselman this season. Tremont Mark, Khalif Battle, Devo Davis, L. Ellis, and Layden Blocker. Like we said, freshmen are unpredictable, but we've only got one in the mix. The only thing left is the chemistry between the transfers and the more senior players that have been with the Razorbacks for a while. So I think this is going to be an excellent addition for Eric Musselman, and I think he's going to do amazing things with this backcourt.
So I'm going to go off on a limb here, and I'm going to guess we have the same number one backcourt. Because there's a team I'm pretty sure neither one of us have talked about yet that's going to be on this list. So I'll roll the dice, and I'll say that number one team based on my list is the Tennessee Volunteers. Is that who you had?
You guessed correctly, David.
There we go. Like process of elimination.
We have been spending too much time together.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to think similar wavelengths here. This is why
I think we only had one team difference in our top five.
I mean, we had them in different places. We had our teams in different places ranking them, but that's kind of the gauge process of this to figuring this out. But Tennessee returning roughly an average of 100 minutes per game to the backcourt this season. Yeah, look that stat up. Vols are returning their number one scorer, their number one three-point field goals made. I keep messing that up. And Santiago Vescovi. Then Zagai Ziegler is back, who was the Vols' number one steals per game and assist leader. They also returned Triple J. James averaged the third most 3-point field goals made, and the number two. He was second on the team per 40 points per 40 minutes, and he was number 5 in 3-point shooting. So you got 3 really solid guards out there, and these guys have been capable, and they have proven to be a capable backcourt together. They made the Sweet 16 last year, had the best defensive rating in the SEC last season, and they're adding Cameron Carr, who Vol fans claim to be one of the most underrated freshmen in this class, to their backcourt. There's a lot that I like about Tennessee's backcourt coming into this season.
It definitely, in my description here for my number one Tennessee, I've got Triple J, exclamation point, Vescovi, exclamation point, Ziegler, exclamation point. I mean, they have a proven track record of talent, and they have a large boost with being able to return Zakai Ziegler. And, he was out with that knee injury. What are you going to do when you can't get on your feet? You mess with your hands. So I guarantee you his handles have gotten 10 times better than they were last season, which is going to be extremely dangerous because, like I compared him last year, new Allen Iverson coming your way out of Tennessee.
By way of Knoxville, you got a new Allen Iverson coming out in the world. That's some very high praise for Zakai Ziegler. But no, I mean, like the last report we got on him on his injury was, yeah, he's going to be, out for a little bit. But he may come back at the beginning of the season. He may get some practice time in. At the latest, he's coming back before conference play. That's what we've kind of heard out of Knoxville. So yeah, they're getting a lot of good pieces that they need to succeed there in Knoxville. And if you're Rick Barnes, you gotta love what your backcourt looks like. I mean, it's a good situation for them. Like I said, Ball's very experienced, very capable team, and these guys have all played together, which are things that experienced, talented, and elite are going to be a combination that's going to help you out quite a bit. And that's why I currently think Tennessee's the number one backcourt in the SEC. And clearly you're having the same line of thought as me.
Definitely. I think Tennessee's going to be a force to be reckoned with this year now that they've got some experience under the belt and moving a little bit further than, the SEC tournament. I think they've got their sights set super high this season, and it's going to take a lot to get in their way.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it's going to take quite a bit. It's going to be a good team. I can't wait to watch Tennessee play this year. Of course, I will be watching them in person when they come to Bud Walton this season. So I'll be excited for that when they come up here to Fayetteville. So that'll be a fun one. That'll be a really fun game to watch. I'm excited for it. All right, let's move on to our next topic here in the show today. Just let everybody know our show today is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, and this is now the Home Field Apparel studio. Definitely go check out Home Field Apparel and all the great vintage stuff they have out there. Tons of cool gear, tons of stuff that's retro, unique pieces that you can wear on game day, sweaters for when it's cold outside, and of course, a little bit of, sweaters, sweat tank tops, things like that. things when it's warm, no matter the weather, they got you covered, and you can rep yourself in school pride at any given point in time. All right. On3's Jamie Shaw has released a somewhat controversial list of the top 10 coaches in college basketball this offseason. This came out. He didn't give a lot of context, and the only SEC coach to make the top 10 in this list is Kentucky's John Calipari. The list lists his resume, including NCAA championship, 6 Final Fours, 16 regular season titles, and a 75.9% win percentage. Cal, being the only SEC coach included, has made some writers a little bit upset, including Kent Smith, who works out of Sports Illustrated. And this is to quote his article. He said, explanation as to how Calipari ended up on the list was needed because there was no way someone had him listed as the only SEC coach in the top 10 when Eric Musselman and Alabama's Nate Oates long since left him behind as a preserved relic in the pre-pandemic world. A lot of P alliteration there. I'm just saying. But the other coaches on the list included UCLA's Mick Cronin, Tony Bennett out of Virginia, Scott Drew out of Baylor, Mark Few out of Gonzaga, Dan Hurley out of UConn, Tom Izzo out of Michigan State, Rick Pitino out of St. John's, Kelvin Sampson out of Houston, and Bill Self out of Kansas. How did I mess that one up? I covered Bill Self when I lived in Kansas City. All right, Maddie, I'm going to start here. What did you make of this list?
I think he didn't mean to make everybody mad. I think there was just a typo. He meant to put top tenured coaches in Division I men's basketball, because that's exactly what this list is. I mean, you go down this list, and while they are all great coaches, it's all, I feel like, looking at yesterday and beyond. We aren't looking at, current selections. We aren't looking at who current players want to go and play for. While, I mean, I'm sure there are tons of players that have John Calipari first on their list, there are so many kids that have other coaches that are doing much better things with brighter futures, rather than some of the names that you had mentioned.
Yeah, and he didn't put these in a ranking. This was not ranked. He just put 10 coaches on there that he said were the top 10 in basketball. And then checking the list, they were in alphabetical order. Cal was number 2 because he came behind Tony Bennett. That's how that worked out. But you look at the coaches who are on the list. The coaches that would be right now very much so deserve to be on this list that are currently on this list. Dan Hurley just won a national championship at UConn. Scott Drew absolutely deserves to be on that list. He took a team that is not tenured at all in the world of basketball in Baylor and made them a national champion in 2021. And then you've got, Kelvin Sampson. Kelvin Sampson, brought to life a Houston team that was, proud tradition, but dead in the water. He brought that whole program back together and brought them to life there in the Bayou area. A lot of Houston pride for that. And then, of course, Bill Self is Bill Self. Bill Self is the best best basketball coach in college basketball. It's Bill Self. But you look at the rest of this list, you got some guys that, you can make an argument for. Mick Cronin, Tony Bennett, Mark Few, if you really like Gonzaga. I could go on that rant for, a little bit, but, he does have a good resume. Let's be completely fair. The winning percentage is a little skewed, in my opinion, but, you got good coaches on there. This is exactly what you were saying. This is not the top 10 best basketball coaches in college basketball right now. This is the best 10 resumes in college basketball right now. I think Kent Smith is making a very valid argument for who are the best coaches right now. But, that's not, I don't think that was the intent of this article. And Shaw didn't really give criteria for making this list. So in reality, it's either A, a bad list, or B, the usual suspects of who to expect to see on this list, more or less, when you're just talking about resumes altogether. But there was one example that popped in my head. And yes, for our older basketball crews, I'm mainly talking about this as a numbers perspective. So don't think this is really an apple and oranges comparison, but the numbers are kind of similar. So would you have considered Bobby Knight Would you have called Coach Knight a top 10 coach when he was at Texas Tech? Knight at Indiana, like Cal, was over 70%. He had national championships, a lot of them. And he did things very little. But when he went to Texas Tech, and yes, I know the conditions there were, the circumstances around Knight there were very different. But all time, he only made one Sweet 16 his entire time when he was in Lubbock. His winning percentage was below 55% in conference while he was at Texas Tech. And he was 70% at Indiana. If he was a top 10 coach back then when he was coaching at Texas Tech, it was because of resume. It was not because he was a best top 10 coach at that given moment.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Pretty much like I said, top tenured coaches, I think, I think it wouldn't even be a top 10 list if you weren't at least to include Oates or Musselman in this conversation based on their current track record with their current schools. And then, you have a few outliers there as well that I think could have made the list.
Yeah, I think there's a few coaches. I think there's an argument for a lot of guys, who've done really well. If you made a list over the top 5 coaches in the country over the past 5 years, or top 10 coaches over the past 5 years, I don't think John Calipari's on that list. I don't think Kentucky fans think John Calipari's on that list. I think there's several. There's a reason that I say that, because Kentucky fans are a little upset about how, the last couple of years have gone. But overall, yes, there's some coaches that deserve to be on that list, like Nate Oates and, Eric Musselman, if you're considering the best in the last 5 years. There aren't many people who do that. I would include Scott Drew on that list. I would include Dan Hurley on that list, but Cal would not make the top 10 if you just looked isolated the last 5 years or something like that. No offense to him. He's resume wise one of the best coaches in the SEC. And I think that was what Jamie Shaw made on 3. So just my opinion on that one.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Like you said, I think Kelvin Sampson definitely deserves it. The UConn coach's name is escaping me. Yep, Hurley definitely deserves to be there based on, his performance last year with UConn and their rise over the last couple years. But like you said, maybe over the last decade, 2 decades, you throw out those coaches. But if we're going recency, doesn't matter.
I don't know, put Cal on that list. Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness. All right. Last thing on the show here today, we are talking about, we've been talking the last couple of weeks of some things that players have done that have been, great and have made things, a little bit better with the NIL money they're doing or how they're helping out in their community. And this week we are turning to women's basketball a little bit. On Saturday, Angel Reese donated $12,000 to our alma mater high school of St. Francis Academy in Baltimore. It was used to cover tuition expenses for a member of the members of the high school's girls basketball team. According to Reese's mother, Reese's benefited from a similar donation when she had her 4 years at St. Francis, and this was her way of paying it forward. Maddie, what are you thinking about this story? I think it's great. Like I said, we've talked about the last couple of weeks how players, use their NIL money and for more than just making a profit off of playing basketball. They're using it in a lot of ways for charity. Angel Reese, again, is not an exception. She is one of the many great players out there using the money that she's making for the good of her community.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite headlines that we've seen so far coming through our, kind of highlight the what
Beyond basketball is what we're calling it.
Beyond basketball, our Beyond Basketball segment. Mainly because you usually don't see women's basketball players, or at least it's not headlined as often, women's basketball players doing good for their communities and, continuing to improve the image of women's basketball and encourage younger players to keep going. I think that's fantastic. And Angel Reese has become such a household name that her continuing to not only better the basketball community, but obviously showing the goodness in herself. It's just great. It's awesome.
I think my favorite part is simply the part where you're paying it forward. Somebody did this for you where they paid your tuition to go to school and play basketball at this place. And here's Angel doing the exact same thing to give back. And she's not even a pro yet, people. She's in college. She could blow out her knee tomorrow not make Team USA and not make the WNBA. I mean, her future is not guaranteed yet. Talent wise, yeah, it probably is. But, in this given moment, something could happen to Angel Reese tomorrow to where she could not make more money and she could use this $12,000. But here she is giving it away because she's making a good amount of money right now and using that NIL deal to benefit her community and her hometown. And that's just one of those things that I think are really great.
Yeah, for sure. I will say, I don't remember if it was a Walmart ad, maybe Target ad. I didn't know she was so obsessed with the color pink.
I didn't either. I did not realize she was so obsessed with the color pink. Did not know that. But I will say when we covered her, she also did last week or is on August 19th. She did a back to school event also in Baltimore. And she featured some Barbie influenced colors, if you will, things that I would definitely associate with the Barbie movie, color choice palette wise. But I knew she had nicknames that went around that, so guess I'm not that surprised by it. Next week we are going to cover the front courts out there and talk about who we think are the best front courts in the SEC. And then week 3, before we start team previews, we're going to go through the top transfers in the SEC. For the meantime, though, what's also going to be coming out, we moved ahead our dates for freshman 15 a little bit, just because we saw the trend and that some other people were putting some freshman content out there. And we figured that, okay, we'll go ahead. We've got some of these recorded already. So they are going to be available starting next week. So get ready for that. It's going to be a lot of Kentucky talk early. We are going to go by a team, really in no particular order, as how we built that out. Also, I want to thank everybody who has been liking and subscribing and watching the channel. This previous weekend, we doubled last weekend's numbers this last weekend. So thank you guys so much. We're hearing you. And as Dolly Parton once, said, if you keep listening to my songs, I'll keep writing them, singing them, so we'll keep doing the basketball podcast as long as y'all want to listen. The show is for y'all. And we love the fact that you guys are here. Please like and subscribe to the Hoops Southbound Show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, guys, as always, thanks for tuning in. Make sure to let us know what content you're enjoying. If there's something you would like for us to cover, leave it in the comments. Give us some ideas because, like David said, we do the show for you guys. So let us know.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. All right. We will see you guys next week. Again, thank you so much for joining us on this basketball world in a football dominated conference. And we will be back next week with more on the Hoops Southbound Show.
Thanks, guys. Have a good week.